Good morning. Today I will talk on the topic structuralism, a study of Levi-Strauss's incest and myth. This particular part is from PG semester 2 paper CC8, and the concept of structuralism is very much important for the PG students, and in this particular lecture I will talk on Levi-Strauss's incest and myth. Okay. So before we begin, let us know something about structuralism first. Structuralism is a mode of thinking and a method of analysis practiced in 20th century social sciences and humanities. It is probably best to approach the term structuralism through an attempt to understand the concept of structure within this theoretical point of view. But it is needless to say, structures in structuralism are neither concrete nor physical. Structure refers to mental models built after concrete reality. Furthermore, these models are not obvious but demand an understanding of hidden or deep aspects of the matter which comes at our hand. Following this approach, structuralism is an attempt to build models which can help to understand, as structuralists would put, to exploit the materials at hand. Okay. So we can see structuralism as a method. It is probably the most distinctive feature of the structuralist method is the emphasis it gives to the wholes, to the totalities. Structuralist analysts insist that the whole and the parts can be properly explained only in terms of the relations that exist between the parts. This essential quality of structuralism method and its fundamental tenet lies in the attempt to study not the elements of a whole but the complex network of relationship that link and unite those elements. Structuralism also seeks its structure not on the surface but not at the level of observed but below or behind the empirical reality. So, in the domain of anthropology and myth studies, immediately after post World War II period, there was a famous theoretician, Claude Lévi-Strauss, who introduced structuralist principle to a wide audience. He was following the ideas of Ferdinand de Saussure and Slovak linguist Ernest Trybowski and Roman Jakobson. Okay. So, Lévi-Strauss specified chiefly four procedures basic to structuralism. First, structure analysis examines the unconscious infrastructure of cultural phenomena, which is very important. Secondly, it regards the elements of infrastructure as relational, not as independent entities. Third, it attends single-mindedly to the system. And last but not the least, it propounds general laws accounting for the underlying organizing pattern of a phenomena. Okay. So, this leads us to the structural analysis of myth as pointed out by Lévi-Strauss. Lévi-Strauss' work on myth parallels his interest in mental process. His attempt to discover unconscious the regularities of human mind. So, the use of structuralist model of myth allows for the reduction of material studied for the manageable levels. The dominant manner to accomplish this goal is based on the use of the following concepts. First, the surface and deep structure, and second, the binary oppositions, that is culture versus nature, and the third is the mediation. So let us go to the first part, the surface and deep structure. To discover this model of a myth, one must explore the deep structure of a myth. The surface structure provides us with the narrative, the deep structure with an explication of the myth. The relationship pictured by Lévi-Strauss of myth is similar to the one Ferdinand de Saussure draws between Lang and Parole, which you already know. This structure is unobservable and casual, which means its power must be unconscious. Human beings subject to this structure and its power are unaware of unconscious of its influences. It is in much the same way the speakers or writers of a language are unaware or unconscious of its rule but can still use them correctly. Moreover, consciousness often involves the misrecognition of underlying structural causes and is a poor guide to their defining characteristics. According to structuralist analysis, a model of the underlying reality has to be constructed in which all parts of the structure are systematically related to each other in the very same way that all the units of languages are related to each other. The same concept which was argued by Ferdinand de Saussure in the concept of Lang and Parole. So, following Saussure, studied hundreds of myths. Lévi-Strauss has studied hundreds of myths, breaking them into smallest meaningful units which he called mythemes. So mythemes are the smallest component parts of a myth. By breaking up myths into mythemes, those structures, the mythemes, may be studied chronologically or diachronically or synchronically. Lévi-Strauss then studied the relationship within as well as between vertically aligned columns in an attempt to understand scientifically through ratios and proportion those thoughts and processes that humankind has shared both at one particular time and across time. This is accomplished by discovering the major binary opposition in the deep structure. Okay, so let us concentrate upon the second part, the concept of binary opposition. Binary opposition, this occurs in nature and it naturally in human mind. There are such things as night and day, left and right, or nature and culture. Nature and culture often functions as binary opposition in tales. However, depending on the tale or myth, the binary opposition changes. Lévi-Strauss sees a basic paradox in the study of myth. Mythical stories are fantastic and unpredictable. The content of myth seems completely arbitrary. Myths derive their significance, according to his research in structural anthropology, not from their individual elements, but rather from bundles of relations. Applying to diverse mythologies, Saussure's insight into binarism, that is, the language derives meaning from differences, the word, for example, the word apple is insignificant and arbitrary as an individual unit only because it is unique, vis-a-vis the word pear, and every other word can be meaningful for human interaction. Lévi-Strauss demonstrated how myths function like Sassoon's theory of language, which I have already mentioned, the concept of lang and parole. No individual part of a myth has meaning in isolation. It acquires significance only in relationship to other elements in the myth structure. Following from this, a single myth is first meaningful when elements in the myth structure. Following from this, a single myth is first meaningful when it is situated among other myths, social practices, and kinship system. For Levi-Strauss, myths are universal, timeless stories whose ultimate function is to represent the resolution of social conflict. On one hand, it would seem that in the course of a myth, anything is likely to happen. But on the other hand, the myths of different cultures are surprisingly similar. He sought a unifying system that could explain why similar myths appear in very different cultures. How are you to explain the fact that myths throughout the world are so similar? Mediation to solution the problem is hence necessary. So, Levi-Strauss proposed that universal laws must govern mythical thought and resolve this seeming paradox, thus producing similar myths in different cultures. Each myth may seem unique, but he proposed it is just one particular instance of a universal law of human thought. In studying myth, Levi-Strauss tries to reduce apparently arbitrary data to some kind of order, and he wants to attain a level of which a kind of necessary becomes apparent. He underlies the illusions of liberty. According to Levi-Strauss, mythical thought always progresses from the awareness of oppositions towards their resolutions. So, in other words, myths consist of elements that oppose or contradict each other and the other elements that mediate or resolve those oppositions, right? Okay, so let us go to some example which Levi-Strauss has pointed out. He mentions a myth to be found among the. Okay, let us go to the first example, Oedipus myth. Oedipus, we know, is from the Sophocles' famous tragedy Oedipus Rex, where Oedipus is the king and he mistakenly kills his father Laius and marries his mother Jocasta, and thus fulfills the oracle which was told before his birth. So, this kind of marrying his mother, which we consider as incest, this kind of myth can be found among Iroquois and Algonquin Indians of North America, which Levi-Strauss suggests closely resembles the Oedipus legend. The story concerns, the North American myth, it concerns the incest between brother and sister rather than the incest between mother and son, which has been depicted in Oedipus myth, and of course murder. Although not the unwittingly slaying by a son of his father, however, it does contain the moral that attempts to prevent incest make it inevitable. In looking at the elements of these two myths, Levi-Strauss asks the question, is this a simple coincidence? Different causes explaining that here and there the same motifs are arbitrarily found together, or are there some deeper reasons for the analogy? In making the comparison, have we not put our finger on a fragment of a meaningful whole? His answer to the last question is always yes. he also provides a test of his theory based on the observations that the native North American myth lacks the riddle to be found in Oedipus legend. If these myths are fragments of a meaningful whole and underlying logical and causal structure, then a riddle suitably transformed should also be found in North American myth. But unfortunately, that riddle is absent there. However, this is indeed what Levi-Strauss discovers. He points out that riddles such as that associated with Sphinx episode in Oedipus myths are almost entirely absent among the North American Indians. So, if such riddle could be found, it would show he has uncovered a fragment of a meaningful whole that was not the effect of a chance but the proof of the necessity. So, he says that among Native Americans' myth, only two types of riddles can be found. One, where they are told to audience by clowns whose birth is the result of incest, and one to be found among the Algonquins, where owls ask riddles which the hero must answer under pain of death. So, this is the same dilemma Oedipus finds himself when he was confronted by the Sphinx. In the myth, Levi-Strauss started with the incestuous brother, the hero of the myth, murders his double, whose mother is a sorceress, a mistress of the owls. This means that we have a transformation of both the incestuous relationship, sister brother, and in case of Oedipus, mother and son, and of the riddle which presents a double Oedipal character by way of incest on the other hand, and on the other hand by the way of the owl, in which we are led to see in a transposed form an American Sphinx, we can say. So again, Levi-Strauss has discovered some kind of meaningful relations between elements and oppositions, that is the incest and the riddles. It is very interesting, and these two elements which are transformed from one myth to another, which actually proves his theory. These in turn suggest other possible relations arising as they do form an underlying and universal structure which thinks these relations and all the binaries. The point of these examples is to unravel the meaningful and the logically based mental whole which lies behind them. This argument is given additional force since it uncovers a structure which manages to prevail irrespective of the influences exerted by specific historical, social, or any kind of cultural conditions. As Levi-Strauss concludes, it seems that the same correlational between riddles and incest exists among peoples separated by history, separated by geography, separated by language, and separated by culture. Comparable transformations of myth can be found in societies as far apart from each other and structurally distinct as native North American tribes and the city-states of the ancient Greece. So this is very interesting. If this is so, the specific feature of these societies cannot explain the characters of myth. Instead, they are explained by the logical structure of the human mind, which accounts for the similarities and transformations detected by structuralism in all kinds of cultural myths. Okay. So let us conclude our lecture with another concept propounded by Claude Lévi-Strauss. He has talked about alliance theory. So, Lévi-Strauss's theoretical contribution to social anthropology are numerous and significant, which we can already see. The best known of these is the alliance theory. He studies the prohibition of incest through this concept of alliance theory. This alliance theory stresses the importance of marriage in society as opposed to the importance of descent. Its basic supposition is that the exchange of women between groups of related men results in greater social solidarity, and that the result of this cohesion is better chances of survival for all members of the resultant kin group. Lévi-Strauss claims that the regulating of marriages through prescriptions and preference and the proscriptions of other type of marriages creates an exchange of women in simple societies. This interchange, accompanied by exchange of gifts, ensure the cooperation of members of these groups. His analysis of incest taboo is thus extremely fascinating. For Lévi-Strauss, the link between nature and culture in humankind comes from these universal proscriptions. In the incest taboo, nature transcends itself and creates culture as the controlling elements of all human behavior. Sex and other drives, which are generally regulated by culture, here man has become a kind of cultural entity. So, to conclude my talk, it can be seen that Lévi-Strauss, using this device and theory of structuralism to look at the construction of the society in terms of a structure. To understand this structure, Lévi-Strauss goes to the relationship that actually builds the structure. By deriving Ferdinand de Saussure's theory of language and the concept of binary studies, Lévi-Strauss tries to trace how myths actually forms a society. Thank you. Thank you so much.